This is Lady L on Statesboro Broadcasting Station 40.2. We are so excited to be interviewing the First Lady of the world, Miss Eleanor Roosevelt. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So, when and where were you born?
I was born in New York City, New York on October 11, 1884.
And what was it like for you growing up as a child?
I grew up in a fairly wealthy family, but I had a tough childhood. My mother died when I was 8, and my father died only 2 years later when I was 10, so that was hard on me.
I'm sure it was. I have always heard that your mother treated you poorly. Is this true?
Sadly, that is true. My mother always called me Granny because she thought that I was old-fashioned looking and so serious all the time.
Well, that is awful, so we're just going to keep going. So, where did you go to school?
When I turned 15, my grandmother sent me to boarding school near London, England. When I first got there, I was scared, but by the time I graduated, I gained a confidence in myself. I learned a lot about myself and life. I returned home a whole new person.
Well, that's fantastic. So, everybody's wanting to know. Tell me a little bit about you and Franklin.
Well, when I returned to the States, we began dating. He was so handsome and attended Harvard University. We spent a lot of time together and we fell in love. We married on March 17, 1905. My Uncle Theodore Roosevelt gave me away.
How cool, a St. Patrick's Day wedding. And I hear that y'all had 6 children together, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Their names were Anna, James, Franklin, he died in infancy, Elliot, Franklin Jr., and John. I kept busy taking care of them all.
I'm sure you did with 6 kids. So tell me a little bit about when Franklin started to get sick.
Well, Franklin's goal was to become president, but he became very sick one summer. The disease that he had was called polio. He nearly died. He lived, but he never walked again. Despite his illness, he decided to stay in politics. I was determined to help him any way that I could. I became involved in a number of organizations. I wanted to help poor people, black people, children, and women have better lives.
Well, that's great. So, how was it being the First Lady of the United States?
Well, the job of the First Lady has always been to host parties and entertain foreign dignitaries and political leaders, but I decided that I could do more than that. At the start of my husband's presidency, America was in the middle of the Great Depression. People around the country were struggling to find jobs and even to have enough to eat. Franklin created the New Deal to try and help poor people recover. I decided to travel around the country to see how people were doing. I traveled thousands and thousands of miles. I let my husband know where people needed help and where his programs were and weren't working.
Well, aren't you just a dedicated wife? So, during World War II, you didn't stay home.
No, ma'am, I didn't. I went to work for the Red Cross. I traveled to Europe and the South Pacific to visit sick and the wounded and to let the troops know how much they were appreciated.
That's great. So I have one more question for you. After your husband passed, you continued to work. Why?
Well, after Franklin passed from his stroke, I was sad, but I wanted to continue our work. For 7 years, I represented the United States at the United Nations, which was created in large part by my husband. While I was a member, I helped to write the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which described that people throughout the world should be treated fairly and had certain rights that no government should be able to take away. I continue to fight for equal rights for the black people and women, and I also served as chair for the Commission on the Status of Women for President Kennedy.
Well, that was a fantastic interview. You gave us a lot of good information. I'm sure our listeners are very excited to hear from you. But I hate to stop, but we are out of time. So thanks again for coming. We really appreciate it. And that was Eleanor Roosevelt, everyone, one very remarkable and dedicated woman. Well, this is Lady L, and back to our music.